Some car brands just refuse to die, and Saab is one of them. And I'm standing here with Anders and Gabriel, and you are enthusiasts who keep alive what this car is actually. It's almost the car that was supposed to become the new Saab 9-3, the Phoenix car. It's supposed to rise from the ashes, and this chassis and engine and all sorts of technology live on here. And both of you worked at Saab back in the day. Would you like to say what you did at Saab?
Yes, I was there for quite a short time. In 2011, I actually started with my thesis project. I had just finished, or was just finishing my education. And then I worked with the front suspension. I worked on an alternative front suspension to the one we're going to look at
today. You actually worked on this car for real?
Exactly.
Back in the days?
That's right.
So this is something close to your heart, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. The funny thing is, back then, my thesis supervisor was Gunnar, who will actually be here to talk about the front suspension. So you're kind of tying it all together here?
There will be a whole bunch of films. There will be films where we talk about the project, which also has a future, not just about the cars we're building now. It might happen that there will be some manufacturing of Saab technology for future cars as well. So it's not completely over here. It's not just about this project. There are dreams of an even bigger project in Trollhättan. We will also take a look at the axles, which, well, the Christmas money that was unique to this car made a big leap compared to the old 9-3, so to speak, or the last one then. And then we'll talk about the powertrain. And we'll talk about the electric rear axle, which was also very, very much ahead of its time when it was being developed. And then we'll talk to Jason Castriota, who did the design for the Phoenix car. And then we'll do a test drive and compare this one to a standard 9-3 and see how much progress had been made in technology development at that time. But what do you say, Gabriel?
I also did my thesis work here at Saab. I had worked here for a little while before it was time to move. My role was actually, I started in brakes for a while, and then I worked with both the front and rear axles, trying to get the whole vehicle concept, simulation, and measurement together.
The electric car concept, the whole vehicle concept.
The electric car was also another project right there at the end, but it was really about aligning the simulation models with reality so that we could build virtual twins even back then. And this was 16 to 17 years ago that we were working on it. Now people are talking about digital twins in the automotive industry, but even then we were trying to create them.
Exciting. We are in Reka's facilities, which are Saab's old premises. Here you can develop cars and measure things. Polstad works here a bit, and all sorts of companies here use Saab's old measuring equipment. Labs and sound labs and all sorts of things. A lot of the infrastructure still remains, and the customers are still in Trollhättan too.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt.
The drive is also something I think still lives on here. It's the Saab spirit that existed. I think it's something unique to Trollhättan, or I've spent some time in Skåne as well. There are some people who are still there. I don't know if it was something that spread there or so, but...
Not at Volvo then?
Yes, it is true that there are Saab employees working there too.
There are lots of them there.
But it was much more like a family here. People worked more closely and much faster too. Less bureaucracy.
So what is it that makes Saab different then? It's kind of legendary, and everyone talks about it.
I think it's because it was a smaller company. If you don't have the same resources, you have to find new ways. And that creates a completely different kind of development organization, which makes a difference.
If you were to compare, since you still work in mobilization, if you were to compare that with China Speed, which we talked about today, did Saab have China Speed, or did Saab's China have it, or was it better quality, or what was the deal? That it was so close-knit and small and faster decision-making paths.
It's actually really hard to answer that. But I think that Saab has really been different companies during these different periods. Yes.
Sure. GM was one thing.
Exactly. So the GM period was one. And before that, you had the combined Wallenberg GM era. And then it was one company. And before that, it was a completely different kind of company. And during all these periods, you could say they had different ways of working. But they've always had the Saab spirit in some way as a part of it. When I was here for my thesis project, I actively sought out this place precisely because I knew this was a company I wanted to work for.
Were you?
But unfortunately, it didn't last very long then. No, I understand that. The bankruptcy came a few months later.
Which year's bankruptcy was that? When was it? 2011. 2011. How did you react then? I knew
about it. Saab had already been through several bankruptcies. And you thought that it would work out in the end anyway. Actually, I had just quit right before the bankruptcy announcement came. I had left with a clear conscience right up until the bankruptcy announcement came, because then I thought that I could have stayed there. But it was really sad. Because it felt a bit more real than when it was final.
You drive around here in Trollhättan and get a lump in your stomach, even I who haven't worked here. You can see that there is so much feeling here. There are empty premises and there are still feelings left. Here you want to get something started, hopefully at some point. A tiny, tiny, tiny mini. I shouldn't say too much. You shouldn't dream big and say that I'm going to do this. But you want to hope to start a small production in Trollhättan. Saab thinking, at least. And technology.
You don't want to give away too much. No.
We're not going to do that. But we still want to tease that there is hope if everything goes as one hopes. And there is technology that was developed in 2009 to 2011 that you think could be used today, which has become more relevant now.
It's not just that, but what we already had back then was actually quite advanced. So what? Does it work in these cars? That's the kind of thing that's coming to cars now.
Now let's talk, so I don't talk too much. Briefly tell us about the project and the cars. What's the deal?
This project started quite a few years ago. Back then it started with the car that's now up on the lift. That's when we got hold of the body shell from the very beginning. It was pretty empty.
Let's go over to it.
We can do that.
So this is a mule that Saab used to develop the next generation, what was supposed to be the Phoenix generation. Exactly. So what year was it supposed to come out? If everything had gone well. 2013.
I think it was supposed to come out then. 2013. 2014 has passed.
Yes. So this is the technology in the new 9.3.
Exactly.
At least a lot of it.
So there are concept images online of a car that was designed by Jason Castriota, a pretty nice sporty hatchback variant. And that was the one I thought of as the first car that this technology would be based on. If you look at this car, it's basically a 9.3 wagon at its core. If you don't know what you're looking at, it looks like an ordinary 9.3. But if you look a bit closer, you notice the widened fenders, and you can also see that the wheels are set further apart. It has a longer wheelbase.
Right, so this one was stretched the way the new one was supposed to be.
The body is the same length, but the wheels are positioned differently.
Now it's a bit less noticeable, but we'll probably get into that with wheel movement later. But
okay. Anyway, this one was pretty empty when we started with it. And then gradually we started getting parts from Nevs. Nevs was selling off parts, and we took the opportunity to buy up parts.
How many parts do you have then?
So currently we have kits to be able to build 8 complete cars.
And those are the ones you can buy now. They're for sale, right?
Exactly.
And there's a website.
Yes, www.griffincars.se.
Griffin Cars. If you dream about what might happen in the future, would you call the cars Griffin then? Griffin, or that
gets tricky with brands.
Stuff like that.
It's sensitive, but
we don't want to get too far ahead, because the idea right now is that it's this raw car that we have.
If you're an extreme Saab nerd, you can buy half a Phoenix.
Absolutely, you can.
With the drivetrain as well.
Yes. So front end, rear end, and even the drivetrain. In the form of a completely new, or it's not a completely new engine. It was new at the time.
But it wasn't a Saab engine?
It wasn't a Saab engine. But without saying too much, it's an engine that fits very well in this ride. You
could say that you get the driving experience from a Phoenix and the interior experience updated.
If you get this, look at this, let's say this cable here. It has the 9-5's interior.
Exactly.
Do you get that as well if you buy a car from you?
Yes, absolutely. You can certainly choose to have that included as an optional feature. It is actually quite a significant amount. It's an option if we can find the parts to build it with. We actually need a car that we can use for the cement panel.
Yes.
That's right. And that's the 9-5. Hard to find these. We have to take
9-5.
Exactly. Oh,
that's a shame.
It might happen that we find 8 of them, and then we'll sort it out. Because what we've done here with these 2 cars is that we've developed we've done all the training work to have drivable cars that are also registered and ready to drive. So these have actually been re-registered as rebuilt vehicles, which means they're street legal. And I would say that they really represent what Saab was supposed to become. And there is no car that does that today.
How many hours have you spent getting these cars to this point? No, it's
Like you've put in an enormous amount.
simply programming and configuring the complex electronic systems that this car has been quite a challenging and difficult task.
Yes, exactly. So the 9.3, an original, has one electrical architecture. You could say it speaks one language. That's right. Then sometime around 2011, a new platform was launched, or actually a platform that GM was working on, meaning the electrical architecture or electrical platform. And that electrical architecture was supposed to be in all GM cars. That electrical architecture speaks a different language than the one in the new 3N. And to get all of this to communicate with each other, I developed my own BCM, that is a body control module, which translates, so to speak. It acts as an interpreter between these two architectures. And it also ensures that all the new buttons that end up here in the melting pot, that everything works. But how is that?
How many hours have you spent getting it to communicate?
I've lost track of how many hours.
I'll use that quote I sent you that you shouldn't let anyone persuade you by postponing this 8-week job, because those 9 months will be the most important 2 years of your life.
Yeah, okay. There have been many evenings and weekends spent on this, but you find the time. It's hard for me to say afterwards. I've put in a lot of time. It's many hours. Now,
What's the price? We haven't talked about that. How much would it cost to buy this car from you now?
exactly. The prices are listed on our website. And we actually have different options. We now have 8 kits in total to be able to convert the front suspension, rear suspension, and also the drivetrain.
Can you get the electric rear axle as well?
No, we're not quite there yet.
We're not there yet.
That would require completely different certifications.
But you have electric rear axles.
We do. So
We will be doing those kinds of things.
take a look at them later. Absolutely. But out of the 8 cars we plan to build, 4 will be in the Vector version, and those will have the engine with 190 horsepower. And then there will be 2 automatics and 2 manuals. And the other 4 will be in the R version. And those have the 220 horsepower engine. 2 automatics, 2 manuals. So that's the setup we have. And then the idea is that we build them to order for the customer.
Okay. And
They will be built by a partner here in Trollhättan. Yes. So they won't be coming, or they're not very far from their origin. Yes, it's,
really fun.
but then we actually buy a used body in good condition. We rebuild it and handle all the registration and update it according to the customer's specifications. So if you want an instrument panel from the 9.5, we can arrange that, because we've developed the technology required for this. And if you want some other modification, we can probably arrange that too.
Fun. If you look at this picture, you've changed both the track width and the wheelbase there. Right. Exactly. A huge job.
Both yes and no, actually. Okay. You see, back when this specific platform was first being developed, the Phoenix platform, Saab was actually in a bit of a tough spot financially and was struggling quite a bit.
As always.
As always, exactly. But then there were requirements that you should make as few changes as possible to the architecture that was the 9.3. And that means that much of the Phoenix platform fits into what was the 9.3. If we look at the rear suspension, yes, some things have been rebuilt. But the main thing is to move the mounting points for the subframe 25 millimeters backwards. And that in itself is not a huge job. But then, for example, there are new mounting points for the rear strut plates. Them. The sway bar is mounted differently because it's a completely different type of wheel movement. Yes?
Sure, we'll talk a lot more about that later. What it is that creates this much more modern driving experience.
Exactly.
But it's less understeered, and it should be a completely modern... As you say, right now, this should be just as good as a modern car today. Maybe even better to drive. Or...
Yeah, well, this part offers an incredible amount of Saab feeling, I have to say. I got it registered in September last year. This is a convertible, so I haven't been able to drive it much during the winter season. But from what I have driven, you really do recognize that Saab feeling. What do you call...
the quintessential Saab feeling, then?
I got this question back in 2011 as well. I realized maybe I shouldn't have said that because it's really hard to define. It's the feeling that you can sense the road and it creates a driving joy that makes you want to drive more. I don't think all cars do that. There are many cars that just become a grey blur. That's not Saab, and Saab never was like that either.
My first experience when I drove the 540 Mule, they were called 540 during the development phase. It was that we had a very agile car that was still comfortable. There was no longer a clear compromise, because before you would feel the road. That's both positive and negative. But this one filtered out many of the negative aspects like joint disturbances and such, but it still kept the communication with the driver. So it's a huge improvement. The advantage is, as you said, that it's somewhat modular, because you can install these new suspension components with some changes to the rest of the car's structure. Then you get rid of a bit of that torque steer, because that's also been a bit of a trademark.
It has a bit of DNA. Yes, a bit
of DNA.
If I just spontaneously talk a bit about the driving experience and what I felt when I've driven, especially this convertible. So they've managed to achieve an effect where it doesn't understeer right away. Typical old Saabs, or the Saabs you see on the road today, it's often that you're in a curve, you just press on, and then the front wheels just slide out. This one has an effect. It's almost like it wants to go into the curve first. So it starts to bite more, and then after a while, it starts to understeer. But that limit is much further ahead than it was on the old 9.3. And another thing you instinctively react to, it's when you drive over joints in the road. So now I drove over joints here on the 45 when I was driving up to Trollhättan. If we take an example with a bridge, I always have the joints here at the beginning of the end. Many cars have the effect that you hear the sound and then there's a bump or a jolt because the front or rear suspension jumps. The front suspension on this one jumps a little, just a bit. You notice it a little bit. You hear the sound, and then there's a jolt. You hear a slight sound from the rear suspension, but it doesn't jolt. So it goes from this badunk, and then you expect there to be a little jerk throughout the whole car. But with the rear suspension, it disappears completely on this one. So you hear dudunk, but then the jerk you expect the rear suspension to have, it's completely gone. So the joint comfort in this car is fantastic.
And then there's the thing with the engines. They also have a slight turbo effect, right? A bit of that DNA in here. The catch-up effect is still there a little bit.
Exactly. There's what you call an overboost function. It's a special pedal position. When you press it a bit extra, you get 20 Newton meters more. It comes a bit like a catch-up effect. It's kind of a tribute to 1999. Lovely.
And then we have these prominent, rugged fender flares.
They're actually necessary precisely because the track width is wider and the wheelbase is longer.
But it also looks bold.
Yeah, I don't think it looks so bad. The fender flares come from the 9.3X, so they're Saab as well. But they're not mounted in the same way, so you can see that quite clearly here. So that is actually what makes the significant difference in the overall wheelbase on this specific build. And then, because of that change, I have had to carefully make a corresponding cutout in the front spoiler to ensure everything fits perfectly.
I see.
Or the bumper.
But what else can we say? So what do they cost now?
The website.
The website. And that's the base price. It depends a lot on whether you want to add extras.
But roughly, approximately, how many hundreds of thousands does a car like this cost?
The base price for the Vector that we've listed right now, if I remember correctly, is 45,000 euros. And the Aeron...
50,000, they really are completely unique cars. If you're a Saab enthusiast, then this will blow you away.
This is the last chance to buy something from the original Saab. And as I said, this is a hobby project. We've run it entirely on the side. So there are no big players behind it in any way right now. It's the Saab connections, many old Saab people who have helped out, found information, lent a hand.
It's a community. We're going to talk to more people here who are involved and also think it's fun. Do you think this could have happened with another car brand?
Well, this was really an innovation company, I would say. There's a slightly different nerdy vibe to this compared to some others. Rover, for example, they dismantled themselves. They had a community and so on. But they were moved over to China quite early. And I think that split the community as such because the brand ended up somewhere else. And it just wasn't the same thing at all anymore. Here, the brand doesn't even exist. No,
It doesn't.
so yes, I definitely think that it creates an entirely different environment. There has always been a certain type of Saab community before as well.
It feels like it's getting stronger and stronger too, in a way.
Yes, that
Is what I experience, at least.
Yeah, I think you're right. Above all, the last cars have achieved a bit of a cult status. Yes,
So these are really going to become extreme cult cars.
yes. I've sometimes said, I don't know if it's true or if one even has the right to say so. But if you go to the museum and look at the Saab, that's the first car on Saab's timeline. You could a bit boldly argue that this is then the last car on Saab's timeline.
we hope it won't be.
Yes, but it's the last one that was owned by Saab. So the technology and the last Saabs whatsoever, and the most modern, technically speaking, these were more modern than the 9 to 5 then.
Oh yes, I actually have two 9-to-5s myself that I drive with both types of chassis. There were actually two different rear axles on it, a 4-link and an H-arm. And up front, there were also two different front suspensions, a hyper front suspension and a regular Mark Person. Both are good. The H-arm and hyper are the best. But this one is several generations ahead. It's a huge difference. So it's kind of a shame in a way when you drive it and know what could have been, because it's fantastic to drive.
That's really the core of the whole thing. Imagine if it had been Kvinnerfors.
That's kind of what we're going to see now in these videos.
I don't know, we like to take a peek at what could have been and what happened to those cars. But do we feel we're done with the intention?
I was also going to say that, at least in my experience, you've had more contact with NAVs, but they've been very accommodating with what we're allowed to do. There hasn't been any grumbling at all, really, so my impression of them is very positive.
Exactly. So now when we're rebuilding these, all the technical documentation is available to do it according to CBS. So it's not like we're making things up or retrofitting anything. We're doing it according to the original drawings.
That's necessary. Yes.
So we've had a dialogue with Nebs.
Okay, then we'll wrap up our discussion on the Canon here, and we'll see you all again in the next video, where we will dive into the chassis details, right?
Yes. Yes.
Good.